What's up, everyone? Kilosaurus Rex here, and is that a fucking spider?! Never mind, it's just a squid crab. Today I'm going to be taking a look at the just-released HIYA Toys Exquisite Basic GXK Scylla figure. This Monsterverse original Titan ranks amongst one of the most popular Titans that I've ever seen in the Monsterverse, second only to Behemoth and Shimo. And speaking of Behemoth, I really hope HIYA Toys releases that sooner than soon. I've been such a good boy, please! Scylla's first appearance was about halfway through the film Godzilla King of the Monsters, at the point where Ghidorah actually managed to defeat Godzilla, but only temporary. Ghidorah let out a thundering call that was heard across the world by all Titans. The Titans then began to make their way to the most populated cities on Earth and wreak havoc for all of mankind. If it weren't for Godzilla's return in the third act, Ghidorah would have used all of the Titans, including Scylla, to destroy the Earth as we know it. At the end of the film, Scylla made another appearance in front of Godzilla himself, who she bowed down to in respect for the one true king. Scylla's final appearance was at the beginning of GXK, where she went through a rebellious phase, for some reason, and decided to take over the city of Rome. And Godzilla wasn't too happy about that.
The fuck you say to me, you little shit?!
While Scylla was one of the most popular characters in the Monsterverse, unfortunately she wasn't exactly the toughest, because her fight against Godzilla lasted for about 45 seconds flat. However, we do owe some gratitude to Scylla because she gave the Monsterverse Godzilla the opportunity to once again perform his iconic Kiss of Death, which to this day remains to be the most brutal death at the hands of Godzilla's Kiss of Death. That's the trouble with these Monsterverse gals. Kiss them and they fly apart. I'm not gonna use that footage. Since Scylla was one of the most underused Titans in the Monsterverse, it stands to reason why multiple toy companies wouldn't try their hand at a Scylla figure. However, toy companies' reasoning for not making a Behemoth figure is beyond the knowledge of us mortals. But when HIYA Toys announced that they were making a fully posable Scylla figure, the fanbase had a very pleasant reaction. Did I say pleasant reaction? I meant they went fucking nuts. Scylla's been sold out after the first week she appeared on the website. I haven't seen that much popularity since the Skullcrawler figure, which I have two of for some reason. I wonder why. I should review one of those. Or both of them. Suffice to say, if you haven't already pre-ordered Scylla, it's already too late. But since their Scylla action figure managed to pay off so well, I have no doubt that they will be focusing solely on Titans and Kaiju figures altogether. Their New York Comic-Con panel certainly gave us some of the most highest hopes we've ever had. As I've said before, Scylla was not used very much in the Monsterverse. She probably had a total of 5, maybe 7 minutes of screen time, but for the amount of time we actually got to see her, it was pretty damn worth it. I believe that Scylla is another piece of evidence as to why most giant monsters are designed to look like insects or reptiles. They look cool, they act scary, and if you make them bigger than they're supposed to be, everyone would be shitting bricks. With that being said, I'm not entirely sure Scylla's an insect. In fact, her physical appearance makes me think she's some sort of crab. The octopus-like tentacles on her mouth, the webs between her legs, even the jagged asymmetrical crab-like legs. I mean, come on. There is no way this is a spider. And just by counting the legs, you can 100% tell this is no spider. And if you count the body parts, you start to realize that nor isn't an insect. The only thing that's holding Scylla back from a full crab-like appearance is a pair of claws. To be fair, I don't want to know what kind of damage she could do if she was given claws. Even the design of her main body has more in common with a seashell than a bug shell. Biological controversy aside, the character we were given was absolutely amazing to see on screen for the brief amount of time she appeared. And the fact that HIYA Toys gave us a figure of this underused and underrated character is absolutely amazing, and it is honorable. Thank you, HIYA Toys. We can tell you have an appreciation for the Monsterverse, and it is more than paid off. If I haven't said it enough already, this figure is the shit! I must say, even I was excited for the Scylla figure the moment it was announced, and they announced it like a year and a half ago. Just before they released their Godzilla Evolved figure, they announced that they had a Tiamat and Scylla figure in the works, and I was pumped for both of them. I'm curious to see how popular their Tiamat figure is going to be when it comes out. But for now, I'm going to be keeping my excitement and enthusiasm towards this figure because, oh my god, it's amazing! Let's start with the usual, detail and sculpt. Fuck! What else can I say but fuck, she's beautiful. The detailing on the figure is absolutely amazing. The paint is phenomenal and the color mixing, mwah, beautifully recreates how she looked in the movie. I am convinced that I am holding a shrink-down version of the Titan that flattened Rome. The colors are perfectly mixed in a way that makes it vibrant, natural, and screen accurate. She was made to be on display. Her shell has a beautiful color and texture that is carried over to all 6 of her legs. And I'd like to draw attention to the detail on the head because it's actually one of the best parts of the entire figure. Scylla's head contains a solid mix of both flesh and hard shell. The top of her head is covered by an armor plate, while the underside of her head is probably one of the most disgusting parts on the entire creature. It's a couple of eyes mixed with a ungodly amount of tentacles, which are beautifully painted, disgustingly realistic, and the flesh and the small amount of flesh that we can see in her eyes is absolutely beautiful. Her eyes do look a little pale, but kudos to HIYA Toys for even including eyes because I could barely see her eyes in the movie. Now that I think about it, her eyes may have been a bit pale. Is she blind? Speaking of gooey flesh, let me bring attention to her underbelly. It is a lot less vibrant than the outer shell because it's only 1 or 2 colors, but it is just as amazingly realistic. And the spikes on the bottom, the weathering on those is mwah! I'm not sure if they got the detail for her mouth right. Is that her mouth or is that like some sort of spout? We need some sort of MonsterVerse documentary to explain the anatomy of the Titans. Scylla's entire body is covered in beautifully realistic paint, and thanks to the amazing color scheme that HIYA Toys has perfectly recreated, her detail and texture just pop, and the sculpt that HIYA Toys went with is more than fitting for the design. As I said before, Scylla is a jagged, asymmetrical crab-like creature, and HIYA Toys has recreated that almost too perfectly. This is a bit of a negative with the figure, but the only reason I say it's a negative is because I care about my fellow collectors. Handling this figure is going to be a bit of a hazard, not for the figure, but for you. She is painfully sharp. Her sculpt is so amazingly jagged and sharp that she hurts to handle. I am not kidding. I would have thought that the spiky ends of her legs would be the most painful part, but boy was I wrong. The only flexible and rubbery-like materials on the entire figure are the tentacles and webs between her legs. Everything else, I strongly advise handling with caution because you could definitely cut yourself. Why does every beautiful woman in my life have to hurt me? I thought what we had was special! Speaking of beautiful, I did forget to mention that her finish is this glossy-like paint that almost makes her too shiny. Scylla is this nasty crustacean monster who has absolutely no right to be this shiny. But that glossy finish is so bright that it's hard to not look at her. This girl was made to be a model. She's got the legs, she's got the curve, she's got the tentacle-filled mouth. Do I have a problem? Moving on from the sculpting and detail, let's look a little bit closer at the design. The material that they use to make Scylla is incredibly sturdy and extremely durable. If it weren't for how skinny her legs are, I'd be convinced that she could survive being stepped on. But, as I was saying, her legs are incredibly skinny, and due to the material that her legs are made out of, might be a little much for the joints to handle. But in my case, the joints are actually holding up pretty well. Probably helps that there's not a great amount of heft or weight to the figure at all. I mean, if you take the legs away altogether, she turns from a giant crab into a giant mollusk. I do advise against manhandling for these joints because while they are perfect for the figure itself, they probably won't be able to withstand brute force. Same goes for the tentacles, by the way. These being the softest part of the entire figure, I strongly advise against using force because they are soft, they are skinny, they are delicate, and I don't think they can support the entire weight of the figure. I do not want to hold this thing by the tendrils. I also would advise being careful with the webbing in between the legs. From my couple days of handling this figure, the webbing in between the legs does seem to be pretty durable, but I'm worried long term if it's able to handle any HIYA Toys heat, considering how many poses I want to get this figure into. Speaking of poses, let's switch from the detail to the articulation, which there isn't that much of, so let's make this quick. Let's start with the least obvious point of articulation, the head. For those of you who are thinking, there's no fucking way that head's gonna move looking like that, and you're right, which is why we have to start by making it not look like that. Allow me to explain. There is a unexpected and unadvertised hidden point of articulation in this figure, and that point of articulation will allow you to pose the head for a decent-ish variety. What you need to do is grab the figure by the top and bottom of the head. Do not, I repeat, do not grab it by the tentacles. This joint is extremely difficult to expose, and if you grab it by the tentacles, those are definitely coming off. So once you have it firmly grabbed by the head, begin to slightly wiggle the head and pull it away from the body. I also advise using gloves for this part because, ouch! Continue to wiggle the head while you're pulling it away from the body, and eventually you will expose The neck! Scylla comes with an extendable jointed neck, which allows her to look up a whole lot more and down not much. But it doesn't matter because if you pose the legs right, Scylla can look straight down. Moving from the head, we are going to cover the highly articulated legs. From what I can tell, there seems to be a ball joint at the base, which is limited by the webbing in between the legs, but it allows for a pretty decent amount of up and down. Hinge joint at the second segment of the legs. I say second segment of the legs because this little point at the start of the legs technically is a segment, but it can't move at all because of the webbing. Third segment of the legs also has a hinge joint, but the third segment is a circular hinge joint, which is basically two halves of a sphere put together, and a hinge joint at the fourth and final segment of the legs. I guess you could consider this a toe or maybe a claw bend. I don't fucking know. Feel free to educate me on this Titan's anatomy in the comments. Each and every one of the legs has the same amount of articulation with the same hinge joint designs. With such a limited amount of articulation, it's actually really surprising that she can pull off an incredible amount of poses. The only reason I'm saying limited articulation is because come on, the legs are basically the only thing that are articulated. Now that I'm thinking about it, when it comes to articulation, this is probably one of the easiest figures that HIYA Toys has ever made. 6 ball joints and 18 hinge joints, plus whatever the fuck they use to make the head. Easy peasy. Starting to make me wonder why HIYA Toys is actually the first to do this. This is really fucking easy. But I wouldn't know. I don't make toys for a living, I just review them. The articulation that HIYA Toys gave this figure is pretty much perfect. She is able to pull off some dynamic, ferocious, and expressive poses. Despite how painful it may be to pose her or for her to even hold a pose, as long as you get the pose to make sense, Scylla can take a posing like no problem. Just make sure to be careful when handling. If you want her to be in a standing up pose all by herself, you'll have to arrange the legs in a super specific way that might seem annoying at first, but once you get the hang of it, she is a posing pleasure. And if you manage to pose her legs just right, she can stand up pretty tall. Now that we've covered the articulation, let's sort out her legs and bring in some other figures to show just how tall this girl really is. Here she is next to HIYA Toys Shimo, HIYA Toys Kong, HIYA Toys Godzilla Evolved, Dasani Water Bottle, Funko Pop Godzilla. I wonder what a Funko Pop Scylla would look like. Ooh. Scratch that. Lego Avengers, and probably the only figure that she was even made to be with, Godzilla Re-Evolved. When it comes to recreating movie scenes, the only figure that you can even put Scylla on the same shelf as is Godzilla Re-Evolved. Because Godzilla is the only Titan she's ever interacted with in the entire Monsterverse. She may have been standing next to Muto Queen and Behemoth in King of the Monsters, but that was a picture, not a battle. I do have a little bit of a bias because the Godzilla Re-Evolved figure is my favorite HIYA Toys Godzilla figure so far. So, for me personally, any fighting pose that I can get these two into is an automatic 10 out of 10. But if movie accuracy isn't your thing, she actually looks pretty good next to the other Titans. Even though she's probably not able to beat most of them. Poor Scylla. Granted, she's a little fragile and she doesn't have that much in terms of dexterity or posability, but she's a fucking crab. What more do you want? The figure itself is so goddamn amazing that she doesn't need any accessories. Hell, what kind of accessory would she even come with? Some sort of spit out web or a shitload of green goo to replicate her makeout session with Godzilla? Yeah, no. This figure is a full 9 out of 10. If you're a Monsterverse fan, 100% pick this up. If you're a giant monster fan, 100% pick this up. If you're an arachnophobic or, caborophobic, why the fuck are you still here? If you love what HIYA Toys has done for this underrated and underused Titan, then by all means, pick it up. Whenever it's back in stock, that is. And since this is a highly popular figure, I'll do you a solid and leave a link in the description for you to my favorite store, HIYA Toys. HIYA Store, if you're watching, I'm not asking you for a partnership or sponsorship offer. I'm begging you. Thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a like or subscribe if you enjoy what I do. Hit the bell to be notified when my next video comes out or when my first live stream starts. I do want to get more Let's Plays out, but I also want to do a live stream, so I think I'll just live stream the game because I don't have to keep track of timing as much. I can just play through the entire game while on my channel, and later I can just cut little bits and pieces off and post them on YouTube Shorts. And since 2025 is about to come to an end, let me know which HIYA Toys figure you're excited to see come out within the next 2 months. I sure hope I made it obvious which figure I'm the most excited for. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you all later! This is what I get for letting my cat stay in my room during the recordings. You gonna behave?
No, I want to swear.
Oi.